Market day in a small town. Or is it? This is a town near Birmingham, population 120,000. Quite a pleasant town with some fine countryside nearby, although it's part of one of the most heavily industrialised areas of Britain. In this part of the Midlands, there are many factories which provide jobs for hundreds of thousands. Factories which turn out a great range of products that are sent all over the world. It's with one of these factories on a typical working day that this programme is concerned. Products of this factory are electrical wiring accessories and switches of many kinds, made in their thousands every day and exported to many parts of the world. Many of the components that make up this kind of equipment are made automatically. Bakelite switch covers, for example, moulded from powder in great machines which need no operators. Switch covers are still trimmed and finished by hand, but with the increasing development of machines, these jobs too are shortly to be done automatically in the factory. There are machines of every size and type in a factory like this, machines that turn out hundreds of thousands of small screws a week, or giant presses that stamp out components from stripped metal. The work on many of the machines involves little more than minding them, keeping the raw materials going in, and making sure that everything is working properly. But there's also a considerable amount of semi-automatic work like drilling to be done. This kind of job requires a light touch and nimble fingers, and it's work generally more suited to women than to men. Working the fly presses, where some of the smallest components are stamped out, is also usually a woman's job. It requires little real skill, but it needs patience and the ability to keep going, turning out the same things all day, every day. The point about much of the work in a factory like this, where so many different parts are brought together to make the final product, is that every worker is important in the production line. Every job, however small, is vital, whether it involves making components or helping to assemble them in the finished article. A girl may not know or even care where the small part she turns out is finally used, but all the same she's still making her contribution to the factory's production. So this is the kind of thing that they make here, electrical installation equipment like plugs and light switches and circuit breakers for use both in industry and in the home. And the important thing about these works is that they make nearly every part of the final product, from the largest switch cover to the smallest screw. So if there is such a place as a typical factory, then from the range of work here at least, this is it. They work here on heavy machinery, in light assembly work. There are men involved in inspection and testing, people working in dispatch, in the canteens, in offices. And they're all involved in one way or another, as in any factory, with the final product. But today we're not so concerned with what they make here as with the atmosphere of the factory, especially in the workshops. What's it like to work in a factory like this? What do you think about doing the same job all day? Is it boring or dirty? What routines do you work? Well, let's go back to the start, right to the beginning of the day, in fact, to a few minutes just before the factory hooter goes. It's 10 to 8 and the first people are starting to arrive. For some, like Brian Smith, an engineering apprentice, it's in his own car, but most of them travel on the special buses straight to the factory gates. Margaret Bailey works in the assembly shop. She comes in on the bus from the other side of town, and usually she travels with her friend Norma, who works in one of the factory offices. For Brian, travelling by car means he can stay in bed that bit longer in the morning, but But like everyone else, he's supposed to get in before the factory hooter goes. The assembly shop, 5 minutes before work starts, is still quiet. Most of the work of the factory is done during the day, and there's only a small night shift. But in a moment or so, Margaret will be one of several hundred people in the shop. The machines will start up, and the day's work will begin, with 2 hours to go before the first tea break. Margaret's job is on the ironclad switches, assembling several hundred every day. But assembly work is becoming increasingly mechanized too, and the job she's doing will soon disappear. Brian is also concerned with production. As an engineering apprentice, he's learning about machines, how to set them up properly, and keep them going for the operators.
Well, how are we fixing our on these? No, we're doing much better now.
So another day's work is underway. But not only for those at machines and assembly benches, but also for the managers and the foremen whose job it is to keep production moving along. For Mr. Barnard, the works manager, there are decisions about production to be taken, and for Mr. Barrett, one of his foremen, the job of carrying them out. And these decisions affect people as well as the product. Margaret, Brian, everyone who works here. But how does Mr. Barnard see his job in relation to everybody on the factory floor?
In an organization like this, which is a medium-sized organization employing something in excess of 2,000 people in several establishments, the prime problem of the works manager is to ensure that there is continuity of work for the employees, that we are manufacturing the things that the customer wants at the right price and of the right quality. But in all this, the prime problem is a human one. I think that all factories these days have to take a considerable interest in the welfare of the people who work for them. We feel that our prime duty is towards them. I think the satisfaction that most operatives obtain in factory life is that they are actually producing something. There is an end product. They are only doing perhaps some little part. They are making a small component on a press that goes into a finished product, but they know that that component is an essential part of the finished product, and without it, the rest of the work is useless.
Asked the personnel if there was a job. She found me a job in the fitting shop. Worked there for about a year, and I left, and I went to work somewhere else, but I didn't like it. And I came back and I worked in offices. I got a bit bored with the office routine, so I had to transfer back down into the factory.
Very closely, but you wouldn't get such a good shape outdoor method.
Brian's work is quite varied. As an apprentice, he'll spend some time in all the main workshops learning about production methods, and of course it's important for him to learn as much as he can from experienced men like the workshop foreman.
Well, I came here straight from a year's pre-engineering course at Warsaw Technical College after coming straight from the secondary modern school. I gained about 4 certificates at school and a G1 certificate at the technical college. The training's varied and interesting. Some of the places are boring, but the majority are very interesting. Places I'm in there, the press shop, it's very interesting setting up the machines, but there's quite a long wait between setting them up.
The holes are not very clear, I don't think. Okay. Could be all right.
By 10 o'clock, it's time for tea break, or breakfast as it's known in the factory. Tea in their own teapots is the way they like it here. Modern trolleys and cardboard cups have never been much appreciated. The tea break doesn't last long, only 10 minutes for each section, but it's a time to relax completely and to get away from work for just a moment.
go bowling last night. What was your score? 17. Can I have a look? Well, you know, it was a bit short. Mine's at the bottom. 17. I did score more than that, but they always ripped the end bit off. Very good.
After the break, there's 2.5 hours more work before dinner. For Brian, there are machines to check or even to retool if production is to be switched to a different component. And if he has any problems, there's always someone who knows the job better than he does.
Yeah. You say, if I want to make a special job of that, I can put what hours in I can, if I want to, you say.
Presses and the machines pound on. To a stranger to factory work, some people's jobs seem extremely monotonous and repetitive, doing the same thing every minute of the day, sitting by a noisy machine perhaps, with apparently little to do. But is factory work really more repetitive and monotonous than other jobs?
There has always been some prejudice against coming into a factory, I think, and youngsters have rather tended to go for white-collar jobs, clean jobs, jobs where they don't have to get their hands dirty. But I think this is dying out. I don't think that there is as strong a feeling on this as there has been in past years. We find that many youngsters leave school, both boys and girls, and go in for a white-collar job. Some of the girls go into stores, to shops. But after a few months of that, we find that they come into the factory. The monotony of an office job has seemed to them to be very much worse than the monotony of a factory job. And indeed, I think there is a lot of truth in that.
I have worked in an office, and I don't think I'd like to go in again, unless I did something different, such as being a receptionist. I may even work when I'm married, but I don't know yet.
Dinner time is the longest break of the day. Some workers, especially the married ones, go home, perhaps to cook for the family as well. But for the rest, there's a canteen or sandwiches at the bench or in the park.
You're good, Charlie.
Brian generally spends dinner time with his mates. Sandwiches, a game of cribbage, and then quite often an argument about the football team he goes to watch, Aston Villa.
Fly catcher in Charlie.
Yeah. 31 for 2.
31. The entrance is on the blade, not the swan, you turn next one, you know.
You turn at the island before you get to the swan.
That's it.
23 for 10.
25.
With dinner over, it's back to work again. And for most people, it'll be the same repetitive jobs.
I think it's important to distinguish between repetition and monotony. We have here some 300 or so young people, and in the case of the girls, they are all on what are known as repetitive work. But I don't think this can be classed as monotonous work. Certainly, if you talk to the girls, they will not look upon it as monotonous. When they start on the job, they perhaps have some difficulty in picking it up, and it is something of a toil and tribulation to them. But once they've got into the knack of doing it, they go on doing it. They talk to each other while they're doing it. They talk about where they went last night, where they're going to tonight, who they went with, what they wore. And I think they derive very considerable enjoyment from this, shall we say, rather free and easy attitude. They certainly don't look on it as monotonous. That is my experience. And I think it's worth recording that if you take a girl from a job that she's been doing for an appreciable time and put her onto a different job where she's got to start all over again and learn different skills, different movements, she'll probably object most strongly. And in certain instances, she would rather leave than be transferred from the job she's used to.
In this factory, if a girl feels that the job she's doing is boring or doesn't suit her, an effort is generally made to put her onto something else. And those who work in a team get a chance to do the different jobs on it. Of course, some people do leave the factory, but there are many who stay on for years doing the same job.
Oh, well, you do different jobs. I mean, you sometimes get an order for about 5,000, that takes you about a fortnight to do. And then you sometimes get an order for about 500, it takes you about 2 days, and you swap around different jobs.
I suppose everything's boring at times, isn't it?
I think while you've got plenty of work, it's anything but monotonous.
I suppose the main attraction is the money. The money's very useful. But apart from that, you really miss the company when you're not here.
Well, I get on well with the girls, considering I'm old compared to them. I get on very well with them. Now I can do the job all right. My mind is anywhere but on it.
While I'm working, I've just got my mind on something else and I don't realise how I'm doing.
But do I like it, you mean? Yes, I love it.
Brian's work, like Margaret's, goes on in much the same way through the afternoon, but he's not tied to a bench and he's able to move from place to place. Already he's got his own views about factory life. But how about Mr. Barnard, an ex-apprentice himself?
I think there's a lot of misconception about what factory life is like by those who've not experienced it, those who've done nothing but a so-called white-collar job. And it is perhaps that the old clogs and shawl attitude dies hard with us. But if you watch the people leaving this factory, you'll see that, particularly in the case of the ladies, it is impossible to distinguish between those who are doing office work here and those who are doing factory work. They do not have this sharp line of demarcation now. And I feel that this is a very important thing, that this demarcation is disappearing, and disappearing fast.
So on the dot of 5 o'clock, the rush for home starts. Out to the buses waiting by the factory gates and down again into the town. So for most of the people here, it's the end of another working day. In the moulding shop, where they have to keep up production, another shift has come on. But most of the rest of the factory is now quiet. The machines have been stopped. The cleaners have been round, sweeping up, and there's only the odd maintenance man left, making sure a faulty machine will be ready for the morning. Every few hours during the night watchman will be going his rounds through the factory. But for most people, it's home. Home to dig the garden or cook the supper, to get ready to go out perhaps, or to wash their hair and settle down in front of television. Now in this film, we've tried to show you something of the atmosphere of one day in one factory. It's not the whole story, of course, but it's part of it, and the conclusions are there for you to draw. But one thing's certain, at 10 minutes to 8, tomorrow morning, there'll be workers coming through those gates behind me to start another factory day.